Hey mama, do you feel like you barely have enough time to brush your hair, let alone knit for 30 minutes a day or anything else that is just for you? Trust me, I totally get it. Between family and the kids, work, if you're a stay-at-home mom, all the things on your plate, finding time for yourself can literally seem impossible. But in this podcast episode today on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast, we're going to talk about incorporating just 30 days of knitting into your day and how it can actually be doable and relaxing. Let's dive in. Welcome to Knit Your Stress Away. Are you a mom who feels overwhelmed, craving a creative outlet, but unsure where to start or how to fit it into your already packed day? I have dedicated this podcast to help you discover practical, guilt-free self-care strategies through the calming practice of knitting. I'll help you break free from the overwhelm, quiet the noise and comparison of social media, empowering you to pick up your knitting needles instead and embrace moments of rest, creativity, and mindfulness. Hi, I'm Nadine, a mom, wife, and passionate knitter. I first learned to knit as a teenager from my grandmother back in Germany, but for some reason, I put my needles down in my 20s. It wasn't until 2020, when everyone was searching for ways to ease the anxiety of the unknown, that I picked knitting back up, and something amazing happened. I found peace and joy in the cozy, calming rhythm of knitting, and now I'm so excited to share my practical tips and habits with you so you can reclaim your time, recharge, and rediscover the things that bring you happiness. It's time to ditch the endless scroll on social media and focus on what truly matters, your well-being. So if you're ready to take control of your stress, ditch overwhelm and social media comparison, rekindle your creativity, and recharge with a hobby you love, this podcast will guide you every step of the way. Take a deep breath, grab your knitting needles, and let's start creating a life with less stress and more joy, one stitch at a time. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. I am Nadine Medina, your host here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. And today we're talking morning routines. And before you're like, oh my gosh, I've heard it all, it doesn't work for me, let's talk about it. I know that finding any time for a new hobby or a hobby in general, maybe it's something that you've been wanting to do forever, but you just don't seem to be able to fit it into your life. And it feels overwhelming, especially when you're already maybe not getting enough sleep and you have an endless to-do list and you just moving kids from A to B all day long and you never really have figured out where your day has gone by the end of it. But I promise with a few small changes, you can carve out some time for knitting or whatever else you are trying to do. For us here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast, we are focused on using knitting as our main stress relief. So even if you only do 30 minutes every other day or 15 minutes every day, it will make a difference when you actually incorporate that intentionally into your life, and it will become your little pocket of calm in a crazy busy life. And I know we're in the middle of the holidays as this episode airs and launches. It is the middle of December. It's even crazier than any normal day in the year. Am I right? And even now you can make this happen. And it is part a mindset shift and part a little bit of intentionality that you're bringing to your day. But I promise you by the end of this episode, you will have a clear and actionable plan to build a morning routine that actually fits your life and allows you to make time for knitting, even when you feel like there's literally no time to even incorporate that. And I know that a lot of you guys who are listening to this podcast are still figuring out how to learn to knit. And that can be a little overwhelming too. Like, when am I going to actually watch some videos or look at the free guide that I downloaded from Nadine or whatever else you need to do? When am I going to go and look at yarn and figure out what needles I need? I got you covered there. I simplified everything in the free guide that I have for you. You can download that at theknittingmamas.com/guide. And I put that in the show notes too, so you can see it there. But all that is great. But if you don't have the time, or if you're not making the time to actually, sit down and do the things, then you will just never start. right? So today is a very tangible and practical episode where we're going to go step by step to see where we can work that time in. But let's first start, like I just said, by shifting our mindset a little bit. And if you've listened to an episode here on the podcast before, you may have heard me talk about this before, because it's something that we need to reiterate. It's not an overnight mindset shift, unfortunately. And a lot of us have been kind of locked into the story of, putting ourselves last and that being okay. And for us to doing everything else for everyone else and for our house and for all the people and all the things before we actually think about what is good for us and how do we need to recharge. And by the time we actually get to that point, we're so tired, we just fall asleep. Or we just veg out on the couch, or we scroll social media, none of which are recharging us at all. And it seems almost like a luxury to say, oh, I'm going to take 15 to 30 minutes for myself to learn a new craft, which I know is going to help me feel better, combat anxiety and stressful feelings. And it seems like a luxury that we can't afford. But here's the thing, and you've heard me say it before, and I know you've heard it before too, but this is something that needs to be said over and over and over again. Taking time for yourself, even just a half an hour, is not selfish. It's absolutely necessary, and you, my friend, deserve to have time to unwind, to de-stress, and to do something that brings you joy. Because if you don't work that in regularly, resentment is almost like it's a given. It's going to happen. So don't be like me and wait too long. Do it now. Change your mindset now. The other thing that I want to touch on is that you can go for consistency before you go for quantity, meaning it doesn't have to be an everyday thing. You do not have to knit every day for an hour or two or even longer to get the benefit of this like therapeutic hobby. 30 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, or maybe 30 minutes every other day if you can't work it in every day. It will have a huge impact on your stress levels and your overall well-being if you start working it in. But if you continue to say, okay, I'll get to it whenever I have time for myself, that's not going to happen. It just won't. But if you think of it as a daily reset, a time to relax, to refocus, to take a breath, to understand that, yes, things are going to just not get done in those 30 minutes, but that's okay because it's for you. If you can figure that out for yourself and change your narrative there, it's going to change the game. Knitting can become this beautiful part of your self-care routine, even if you feel like, oh gosh, I don't even have a self-care routine right now. Let's start small. Let's work something in this one thing that you are going to love and that's going to bring you some joy. And then watch how you are transforming that into the story of, oh, wait a minute, I do deserve this for myself. This is not me being indulging, right? This is me taking care of myself, which I need to do if I want to show up for my family in the best way possible. And I do also want to reiterate that our lives are not about being productive with every second of your day, right? Like productive, it also depends on how you sort of identify or how you, what's the word I'm looking for? Define. The word's define. How you define the word productive. What does that mean to you? Because if you really do think about it as doing stuff all the time and just being busy all the time, in my opinion, that is not being productive. Being productive means that you are doing things that are actually important to you and you get those done in a way that doesn't feel super stressful. And if you think about it that way, you can actually think about your self-care routine and your knitting journey, your knitting practice as a productive thing, because not only are you actually creating something with your own hands, but it's something that means something to you. It's meaningful. It's a meaningful activity and it relaxes you. It has so many benefits all in one. If you can get 30 minutes of that into your day, It's a game changer, and you can absolutely justify this, right? So let's talk about how we can actually build a morning routine that fits your life and that fits in some knitting. We're going to have a couple steps here. So if you want to take some notes, go ahead. If not, just save this episode for later so you can come back to it. What I want you to do in step 1 is think about what your morning and your routine, I'm going to put it in air quotes here behind my microphone, but what your routine looks like at the moment right now. It's possible that you are not even going to call it a routine because it doesn't seem like it's very intentional, and that is completely okay. You may be rushing around from the moment you wake up, or you may have a few minutes of quiet before everyone else gets up. It depends on what stage of parenthood you're in, like what age your kids are. But it's possible that mornings are pure chaos. I totally remember those days where I was like, oh my gosh, what has hit me from the second that my feet hit the ground? But maybe you have a little bit of downtime or the potential of a little bit of downtime in the morning, but you're just not using it for yourself. You may be using it to do some chores, to get some dishes done, to get some laundry done, whatever it might be. And you don't even think about using it for yourself because you're just like, okay, I just need to stay ahead. I just need to stay ahead so I don't fall behind today. Trust me, I've had all those thoughts and I've done all those things. But what I want you to do is just kind of think about, okay, from the moment you wake up until the moment you catch the next little break in your day, meaning when are the kids busy with something? When are they occupied? When are they going to school? If they're not home with you, when are they out of the house? So just kind of make note and how much time goes by and what you're filling that morning with, or what is that morning being filled with for you, which in a lot of times we are just very reactive in our days, right? And you may have heard me talk about this before as well, where I suggest not to have your phone in the room, meaning don't even touch your phone for the first half an hour that you're up. It eliminates a little bit of that reactiveness because when you look at your phone, you generally are reactive, not proactive. So we want to get out of that just continuously being reactive. But it's totally possible that your mornings are filled for you at this point because you just feel like you don't even have any control over it. And we're going to change that, okay? So step number 2, now we're getting into so now we're aware. Now we know, okay, this is what's happening. It's not good. It's not bad. We're completely non-judgmental here, right? It is what it is. Now we're going to look for opportunities where we can maybe make small adjustments. So, for example, is there any chance that you could wake up 15 minutes earlier to start? Just 15 minutes, maybe even just 10. If that's something that you can't even think of because you're so tired, let's backtrack. There's also the evening before, right? You can go in there and kind of look, okay, can I go to bed 15 minutes earlier? Is that possible? If that's hard for you, I totally get it. Because going to bed is always easier said than done, especially when you're in the morning, you're like, wow, I'm so tired. I'm definitely going to bed early. And then evening rolls around and it's the first time you actually take a breath and you're like, nope, I'm not going to bed now. I want to have this time to myself, right? So, but generally in the end of the day, we're just so out of it and so tired. The intentionality is completely out the window. And usually we just stare at the TV screen, right? Or at Instagram and scrolling on social media. Again, not exactly the most, rejuvenating activities. But let's talk about this. Maybe there's a way for you to swap 10 minutes of scrolling social media for your knitting needles instead. And this can happen in the morning. This can happen at night. I find it easier in the morning because you're just a little bit more ready normally than at the end of the day when you're just completely dead tired. But we're talking about very small shifts here. You don't have to overhaul your entire routine. You can just carve out a few extra minutes that you then exchange for whatever you were doing then. You exchange it for a very intentional moment of calm, right? And maybe you can even identify things that can either be delegated or eliminated completely, because when you make a kind of an inventory, like we talked about in step 1, and you write down the things that you're actually doing in those times during the morning and what fills your time, you might actually see, oh, I really don't need to do that. Or I can do that in the evening, like laying out your kids' clothes. If that takes up time in the morning, you might be able to move that to the evening and save yourself that time in the morning so you can have a little bit more of an intentional morning routine. In my personal opinion, and I'm talking about doing certain things at night, so you don't have to do them in the morning, because I do feel, and I do believe, this is from experience from years and years and years of doing a morning routine and kind of perfecting it and just shifting it around as I go through seasons of life. I believe that a morning routine needs to be extremely intentional for you to have a wonderful and really great day. Not saying that every day will be amazing, but I do know for sure, and I know this from many years of experience with a morning routine, that when I do not get my morning routine, if I get up and I have to rush around immediately, which happens every here or there, of course, I don't have that kind of feeling during my day that makes everything better. In other words, I'm not as resilient. I can't just bounce back. I'm grumpy. I feel like I'm missing out on something. I feel like I didn't have the time to myself that I usually get and that I need to feel together and grounded. So all that matters as you're thinking about this. Like, when can I maybe move certain things that I now do in the morning to either a later time in the day or to the night before, so that it just kind of eliminates out of your morning time and you can do something that is truly filling your cup. And whatever that might be. I mean, I'm talking here about working in some knitting time. This is the whole concept here, but you can also take a walk. You can meditate. You can do both. You can listen to meditation music as you knit. It's like, I mean, it's amazing, right? It just doubles up that whole potential of stress relief as you haven't even begun your day. So imagine how much more calm and relaxed and just happy you feel as you go into your day. So that's why we talk about actually doing these things in the morning and kind of like free up your morning time from chores, from things that need to get done in order to work in more joyful activities. So another example would be the breakfast dishes. Do they have to be done before the kids go to school? Or can they wait until you get back? Or is there something else that you do in the morning that can you shift around when you take a shower, if you even have the time to do that right now? But again, think about what your morning currently looks like. And I know this too from all these years of doing this and my kids going, like, I started an intentional morning routine when my oldest was, I think, 1 or 2. Because back then I didn't have time for a shower and I was ticked off. I was so mad that I could not even figure out when to get a shower in. And then I just decided, okay, let me do it right before she gets up. Like, it's my chance to get in there and take a breath and start my day nice and relaxing. Like, really, I mean, as relaxing as it can get when your kid is a toddler, right? I'm not talking about, oh, this is like a spa day. No, but it's a moment for myself. And it made such a big difference. And I was just so happy that I had the idea to even try that. And it seems such like such a tiny change, but it can make such a big difference. And now that same child is almost 17. So it's been that long, and I can tell you that I have moved things around in that morning routine just as everyone else moves and grows and changes. And I have added things, I have subtracted things. It's kind of an ongoing process, but I always encourage you to look at what you're doing right now and how it's working. And if it is not working, see if there's something that you can change, right? When do you do your laundry? Does it have to happen in the morning? Can it happen maybe a little bit later at night? There are ways to adjust this and to carve out some time. My biggest one is, probably always will be, because we all fall into this trap over and over and over, is the phone time, the scrolling time. I know it happens even when we're busy in the morning, because that is where a lot of our time goes completely unintentionally and accidentally, because our minds are just wired to get dopamine hits and our phone is right there to give those to us. So we grab our phone when we are really, needing to do something completely different that would either get a chore out of our way, or it would be giving us some time to take a breath and, take some intentional time for ourselves. Like, how many times did you look at your phone and you realized, oh my gosh, 15 minutes have gone by. I could have totally done 15 minutes of yoga. I could have taken a walk. I could have meditated. I could have knitted. I could have done whatever else, right? Something much more constructive and much more relaxing. So think about those times as well. Be very honest with yourself. This is something that we often say, oh, no, it's not that big of a deal, because we just don't want to admit it. Trust me, I've been there. It happens all the time. But when you really honestly look at it, you're like, yeah, I did grab that phone while I was supposed to load the dishwasher, a task that could take 5 minutes if I just did it. But now it took 25 minutes because 20 minutes of them I was scrolling Instagram. So been there, done that. But those were just some ideas just to kind of get your ideas moving as to what you can change. Because oftentimes if we're in the middle of it, we may not even notice, oh, that could change. That doesn't have to happen here. I could do this later. I could do this the night before. So be a little creative and see if you can come up with a little bit of rearranging. It's a little bit like playing Tetris. So once you've identified these small changes, it's then time to intentionally create a block of time for your knitting. Could be first thing in the morning before your kids are even up. To me, it's the ideal situation. Obviously, that doesn't always happen because they get up sometimes when they hear you, depending again on their age. Mine right now, I need to drag out of bed. So it has become a little bit easier to do things for myself. I can tell you there's also a downside, because there are times when I'm like, I don't want to go upstairs and wake them up yet. I'm enjoying myself way too much here with my coffee and my knitting and my meditation. And it's so nice and calm and quiet and no one is up, and I don't want anybody to be up. But that's just, another side note of how this changes over and over and over. So you have to just kind of intentionally, figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to do first. This is what I'm trying to do next. And then I'm going to do this. And this might change in 2 weeks, in a month, in a year. And we're just going to have to roll with it. But for now, start with whatever fits best in there. If that's 10 minutes, if that's 15 minutes, or if you actually make it to 30 minutes one day, love it. Amazing. But also don't expect for it to be the same every single day. We have to stay flexible. We have to just kind of take it as it is, but be as intentional as we can be while we build it. And as we go and over time, it becomes a habit. And you think of taking this time for yourself before you think about grabbing your phone, checking your email, looking at social media, because you know that this thing, either knitting or whatever else you pick for your self-care in the morning, it will make you feel better. And once that clicks and you notice, oh, this is the thing that makes me feel better, you don't even really care about grabbing your phone anymore. And that is magical. So the best part, none of this has to happen every single day. It doesn't have to happen at the same time. It would be nice, of course, because it's very predictable, but none of our lives are predictable, right? Especially with kids around, and it's just not going to happen. They may be predictable for a day or two, and then everything changes again. But if you already are in the mindset of planning for it to begin with, it's much more likely to happen. So that's the first thing. But also, if you do stay flexible and you realize that some days you might have 15 minutes in the morning, but other days you may actually get 30 minutes. And in some days, it might be after you drop the kids off, wherever and whenever it happens. But just stick with it make it a goal. Make it a goal in your head that you are going to work this in tomorrow. That alone will change the game. So I have a couple of tips for making it a little bit easier to fit this into your life, aside from the strategic steps that I just gave you, but just a couple of tips on the side. Number 1, keep your supplies handy. Sounds easy enough, right? But if you have everything in a little bag and that bag sits on your counter in the morning, all you have to do is grab it, open it, you start knitting, right? If you have everything you need in there, you don't have to walk around and spend 5-10 minutes just to find your stuff. So that'll make it a lot easier. It's just remove the barrier. Also, the other one, leave your phone far away unless you need it because it's like, you expect an emergency or whatever. I always say, you know what? You don't need your phone at night and you don't need your phone during the night or in the morning at all. So if you don't even touch your phone, but you grab your knitting before you do that, make yourself a coffee, grab your knitting supplies and just take 15 minutes. Changes the game. Try that. Compare that to grabbing your phone first thing in the morning. Take 15 minutes on there. You're going to feel a whole lot different. Tip number two, use your downtime wisely, even when it's like beyond the morning routine, which is what we're majorly talking about in this episode. But any time during the day, use your downtime wisely. And by downtime, I mean 5 minutes while dinner is finishing in the oven, or 10 minutes before the school pickup while you're sitting in the car and waiting for your kids. Those are little pockets of time that can add up. And if you fill them with an intentional project like your knitting, it will have such a better impact on your mental well-being, on your stress levels, and it adds up to a complete project at some point versus, spending those 10 minutes doing nothing or scrolling your phone, which is really mostly what we're going to do. Well, you can already imagine what the difference is between those two. So be very intentional and think about it when you have a moment to spare, which downtime sounds like, oh, I have so much downtime. Like it sounds like a thing, but it's not. I'm talking about little pockets of time where you're like, okay, I could grab my phone now, or I could grab my needle. So have that little bag nearby wherever you go so that you can actually make this intentional decision of using it versus using your phone. And tip number 3, pair your knitting hobby or habit with another habit. It's called habit stacking. I learned it in a book called Atomic Habits. If you guys have read it, I'm going to link it up. Really great book. But when you pair a new habit that you're trying to establish with something that you're already doing as a habit, meaning you're not thinking about it, right? Like brushing your teeth or making your coffee or whatever, it is much more likely for you to stick with it and to do it. So in the beginning, of course, it takes a little bit of practice to actually remember to do it, which is why, again, have your little project bag nearby. But maybe you just put it straight next to your coffee maker and you're like, okay, cool. There it is, making my coffee. And it's it's impossible to miss. And I'm going to sit down, enjoy my coffee and knit for 5 to 10 minutes. This is obviously when your kids are doing something else. For example, they're sleeping. That would be ideal. But let's recap really quickly what we just talked about, because I know it wasn't exactly a short episode, but I do hope that you got something out of it. So to recap, by making a few small adjustments to your morning routine, you can actually create time for knitting, whether it's 30 minutes a day, 30 minutes every other day, 15 minutes here or there. But it does start with giving yourself the permission to actually make that time for yourself. And then you're going to look at your current routine to find those small windows of opportunity, and then keep your knitting accessible. Use your downtime or any time in between, wherever you have it, minutes here or there, and use it intentionally. Build your knitting into those times as well. And lastly, pair knitting with any other habit that you may have where it fits in so that you can build consistency and stick to it. Because I have so many amazing beginner knitters who would love to do this every day. And they continue to put it on the back burner and say, oh, I just don't have the time. I just don't have the time. And they're always so frustrated. And they come to me and say, oh, I haven't done it again. And, I just can't get this sweater done because it's just too long and too much. And I never know when to knit. Here you have it. And I know none of it is perfect because we're all so very busy, and I feel you. And I'm not trying to tell you that you're not and that this is an easy thing to build in. I know it's not, but I know that it's worth trying and worth continuing to build it in, because it's going to become a habit. You're going to get better at it. So you're going to produce things that you're going to love wearing, and it just has so many amazing benefits that come with it. I can't stress it enough to really, really try and keep making it a habit that you continue to build into your life. If you feel like you need some more support, we got you covered. We have a free Facebook group for beginners, for people who are already knitting. There's lots of ladies in there who are very experienced and happy to help. So we're going to keep you accountable, cheer you on. All you need to do is actually come in there. It's free. You can go to thenittingmamas.com/group. Go in there, and then we're going to admit you to the group, and you can show us what you're working on. If you're not working on anything yet and you're like, yeah, I just listened to all of this because I am ready to start knitting, I got you covered there too. You can download your free guide, Become a Knitter in 5 Simple Steps, and get started. Anytime you have questions, please hop over into the group and ask us. We're happy to help. The guide can be found at, let me think about the link. It is guide.thenittingmamas.com. Popping it into the show notes as well. It's much easier for you to access it just right through there versus having to type it in anyway. And I hope this was helpful. If you feel like somebody else could benefit from this episode, please feel free to share it and save it for later if you need to re-listen. And I hope this was beneficial to you and you have a wonderful week. Talk to you next time right here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on today's episode. I hope you're walking away with a bit more inspiration and a few ideas to make your self-care a priority. If today's chat gave you a little boost, I'd love it if you could leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This helps other moms discover the podcast and start finding more calm and creativity in their day as well. And don't forget to join us over in the Knitting Mamas community on Facebook by going to thenittingmamas.com/group. Thanks again, and remember, you deserve time for yourself to recharge and feel your best. Catch you next time on the Knit the Stress Away podcast.